So if you're going to year 13 this September, this video is for you. Do you think your social life took a toll due to the stressful deadlines of revising for year 13? Was revising for the BMAT difficult? Would you recommend doing pre-reading for year 13 content? Please, please, please this year, if you didn't last year. How can I balance everything? UCAT, A-level, personal statements, interviews. Is the jump actually that big? You guys have sent me a bunch of responses here and a lot of questions here based on year 13, some things about uni applications, things like that as well. So I'm going to go through all of them and I'm going to answer them to you guys. Hopefully you get a bit more of an idea on what's to come in this year, because you've probably had a lot of big things about this year because, you know, A-levels, uni applications, UCAS, the big jump from year 12 to year 13, all this stuff I'm going to be covering today. And as a former year 13 student now going into university this September, I think I've got quite the experience to share with you guys, and hopefully it helps you out. Even if it's just slightly useful, that's going to be more than enough for me. So first question here is your Cambridge application journey. What was the interview like? I'm going to make an entire video on this, so stay tuned for that. The whole Cambridge experience, the interview. I'm just going to say right now, a lot of strange things happened in that interview and I'm really excited to tell you guys. I think everything happens for a reason though, even though I didn't get into Cambridge and I put so much effort into that. I genuinely think I'm better off now in UCL and I feel like everything happened for a reason and I think everything's just worked out so well for me. Let's just move on. I'm going to postpone that question and we're going to take that to an entire video in itself. Do you think your social life took a toll due to the stressful deadlines of revising for year 13? I'm going to say no. I think I kept up with things quite well over year 13 just because I knew the burden that it was going to be, right? I tried my best to be as up to date with everything as possible. So I was an early applicant, which means that my university application had to be submitted at the start of October or something like that. But it was earlier than the other candidate whose deadline was all the way in, I think, January, if I'm not wrong. Something like that. I can't remember exactly. But that meant that I had done a lot of the personal statement stuff at the very start of the year. And I think that way it was easier for me to keep up on things. I don't think there were many stressful deadlines in year 13. What was the big deadline? The big deadline was submitting your university application, right? But if you keep on top of things and if you try and do things as early as possible and you just make sure that you don't leave it until the deadline, which our school did pretty well. They made us make our first draft in the summer holidays. Even though it didn't take too long, I spent a bit of time during the summer making that first draft, and then when I came into school I already had something. I think a lot of people make the university application to be much more stressful than it is. The actual application of putting everything into UCAS and doing your personal statement genuinely is not that hard. Personal statement writing is not hard by any means. The difficult part of the personal statement is getting the experience and getting the things that you have to actually write in the personal statement. But once you've got that, writing it together isn't that bad. You just piece it together, you string all the words in, you make it somewhat coherent, and then you send it off to your teacher, make them reword it and let them give you some advice, and you just continue doing that until you get a good draft. So I'm gonna say no. I think my social life was pretty much the same as it was in year 12. I genuinely think that if you keep on top of things in year 13, it's not hard. I'm going to say this quite a bit, and I've been saying this back since the start of year 13. Year 13 isn't a hard year by any means. It's just a lot. It feels like you're doing year 12 on ×2 speed. It feels like you're going through everything much faster because you've got so much things to juggle, and so it can be overwhelming, but if you keep on top of it, it's going to be fine, right? It's not a hard year. You just have more to do, and if you have more to do and you actually do those things on time, it won't be too difficult. There will be stresses, there will be difficulties, but if you keep on top of things, if you're proactive, trust me, you're going to be fine. I still had a good time in year 13. Genuinely, it was one of my favorite years. It was a good year. I genuinely enjoyed it a lot. So I hope that answers your question. Just really make sure to stick on your deadlines and make sure that you don't leave things till last minute. But I mean, everyone always tells you that. It is really easy to keep on top of it though as well. It's not hard. Okay, next question here is, was revising for the BMAT difficult? If you don't know what the BMAT is, it was an entrance exam that I had to take for Cambridge University for medicine and also for UCL. I'm pretty sure it's been discontinued now. So you guys, if you're doing medicine, you just have to take the UCAT exam as the entrance exam. I had to take both the UCAT and the BMAT. The difficult thing about the BMAT exam was that it was right when I was revising for my own exams in A-levels, right? My A-level content. I was learning new A-level content and I had to go back over GCSE physics. Why? Why am I doing that? So this BMAT exam had GCSE biology, GCSE chemistry, GCSE physics in it, but for some reason the questions are all really odd and just really difficult to do, and the timing was awful. I had a really bad time with this exam. I mentioned it as well in my university results video. It was not a good exam. I was not doing well in any any of my mocks. Every single time I was doing a past paper, I just flopped. Even in my actual exam, I didn't do that well, and I was not happy about that score, and I really didn't think I was going to get into either UCL or Cambridge with that score. Somehow I'm here and I got into UCL, and I'm so grateful for that. But I genuinely think I scraped it into that interview because my score was low compared to what they wanted me to get and compared to what I saw other people get that also got into UCL and things. Okay, next question. How did you get an A in Chem? I'm going to make an entire video on chemistry and biology and math. I've already made a few videos and tips, but now I've done the A-levels, I've got a few more things to say about every single one of them, especially maths and biology. Chemistry, because I got an A rather than A star, I'm not going to say as much for. I want you to listen to someone who has that expertise, who did get the A star, right? But to be honest though, Chem is very dependent on the exams themselves, because sometimes you get really good ones, sometimes you get really bad ones, and you always miss the grade requirements by just a tiny bit. What would you recommend during what would you recommend doing during my Chem lessons if I don't want to study? I know who you are, and I know why you're saying this, because if you know me, if you're in the same chemistry lessons as me, I really hope my chemistry teachers aren't watching this, but both of my chemistry teachers were not very good, and I learned nothing from them. It was probably a big reason why Chem was such a headache for me, because none of them could teach. Every single lesson, I wasn't learning anything from them. Even if I tried my very best, the amount of random waffle I did during those Chem lessons, those are some good times. I know I didn't do much work in them, and I genuinely don't regret not doing work in them, because even if I tried to do work in those lessons, I don't think I would have gotten anything done. I'm gonna miss all of you guys who were in my Chem lessons, because those are some beautiful times. I actually want to go back to those days sometimes. Would you recommend doing pre-reading for year 13 content? No, that's my answer. There's no need, just don't. You've got bigger things to worry about. If you want to do something extra, read some books based on what you want to apply for, right? Do those things, but don't pre-read on A-level content. That's just useless. Sure, it's going to give you a bit of head start now, but trust me, once you get a few months into year 13, you're not even going to have time to review the content, let alone pre-read it. You're going to be flying through content so fast, you're just going to keep on piling them up somewhere and being like, oh, I need to do this later. Oh, I need to do this subject later. You're going to have so much to do at one point where pre-reading is not going to even be on your mind. You've got homework, you've got deadlines, you've got exams, you've got so much going on that you're not going to be pre-reading. How many hours should we be revising each day? I get this question all the time. People always ask me, how many hours do you revise? I don't know how many hours I revise each day, because I sit down and I'm like, what do I need to get done today? And I get that done. It doesn't matter how much time it takes me to get that done. It's more about, did I get that done? So rather than thinking about it in hours, I know you're not going to like this response, think about it in terms of your tasks. Each day, have a set amount of tasks that you want to do and try and work towards getting them done. Try and highlight a few really big tasks that you want to really complete in that day, and maybe some other optional tasks that you'll try your best to do, but as long as those main important tasks are done, then you'll be happy. For the first half of year 13, you're probably going to be spending an equal time on your application and your A-levels, right? You want to be trying to shift your attention to both of them whenever you see fit and whenever is important. So sometimes you might have to put more attention towards your application, sometimes you might have to put more attention towards your exams. Then once you come to the second half of the year, once all of that stuff is out of the way, you really want to focus on your A-levels and you really want to put the work in for those exams. So at that time, you really want to make sure that those free periods you spend revising, and those times that you come home from school, you actually spend doing productive revision, and then you're good, right? You don't have to overdo yourself. You just need to make sure you're doing a good amount each day. And so it's all about getting those reviews in and making sure that you're constantly going back over things again and again and again. It's that rotational revision. You want to start with something and you want to make sure you come back to it the next day. You want to make sure that you come back to it the next week, and you want to make sure you're always coming back to it. Don't focus on how many hours you want to get done. Focus on what you need to get done. That's my advice. When should we be done revising AS content? You should never be done revising AS content. You should always be revising your AS content. Throughout all of year 13, I was constantly doing my flashcards for AS. So for all the stuff I did in year 12, I was constantly going back over it. Please go back over your year 12 content regularly. Make sure that there's nothing that you're forgetting, and you're making sure that you're doing everything on a regular basis, so you just have it always in your long-term memory, because by the time you come to your exams, you're going to have so many questions to do and so many past papers to do that you really wanted to make sure by then that you've reviewed everything, that everything's in your mind. So then you can automatically just go straight to your practice and you'll be fine. This isn't really a question, but why was everything you did in year 13 so clean? I appreciate that. There's another one here as well. Why is everything you do so clean? Thank you guys. This is why I love my friends. They're always hyping me up. I appreciate it. Next question. Is it calm? Okay, next question here. Is it calm to start revising nights before exams? No, it's not. And I know who you are. I know why you're asking this. And you know yourself why this isn't good. So I'm not even going to tell you. From experience, you should know that that is not a good technique. Because even if you get 0 hours of sleep and you spend the entire night revising, you're going to get nowhere. And when you come into that exam, you're going to be like, I don't even remember looking at half of this stuff. Not even half, 80%, probably 90%. A-levels you can't cram. Maybe GCSE you could get through cramming. But year 13, please, please, please this year, if you didn't last year, please be constantly going back over it. How important are year 13 mocks if you already have predicted grades and have med interviews coming up? They're not important. I'm just going to say this, your year 13 mocks are not important, especially if you have interviews coming up. If you have an interview coming up and you have exams to worry about, forget the exams. Literally get 0 in the exams. No one cares, okay? You want to be making sure that you get that med interview place and you get that med offer. Don't care about your exams, please. When I had my UCL interview, I had it literally in between my end of year exams. And you know me, right? You know that I don't want to do badly, and I'm going to try my best, even if I have an interview, to try and revise for the exam. If you have an interview, if you have anything that's application related, put your efforts into that. No one cares about these mocks. No one cares about these end of years. These exams here are just to help you revise, right? To help you make sure that you're revising. But right now, if you have an interview, that should be a priority, and you should know that. All right, next question. How can I balance everything? UCAT, A-level, personal statements, interview. This year is the year of balance. This is going to be a lot, especially as a medical student, especially if you want to be doing medicine. You're going to have so much to juggle this year, and that's probably why people say it's so difficult. If you're good with your time management and you're good with managing a lot of things at once, you'll be fine. And even if you're not, just make sure that you're keeping on top of things at all times. I would say to treat everything one by one. Don't try and do lots of things at once. Try and look at it one by one. Don't be doing interview preparation whilst you're revising for your UCAT. Don't do stuff like that. Focus on one exam, then focus on the interview, then focus on your A-levels. Do it one by one. That way it's not going to feel as stressful, and that way you're still going to have a life. Best thing to do when starting in September. Now, my biggest advice is to make sure you start your personal statement early. Try and get that out of the way. I think a lot of people worry about the personal statement and are like, I don't know what to write. I don't know how to write it. If you have the work experience, if you have the books that you've read, if you have everything like that, just write whatever. It doesn't even matter if it's horrible. Because after you've written a page, after you've written that initial draft, it's easy to fix things up, to send it to people, to try and make it better. But if you have no initial drafts, you have nothing to work with, you have nothing to improve. The hardest thing is getting that first draft. Once that first draft is there, then it's a case of just improving, touching things up, maybe shifting entire paragraphs if you have to, but just get that first initial draft done as early as possible, even before September if you can. But I would say as soon as you go into year 13, really focus on that personal statement, get it out of the way. Try and get your entire application as quickly as possible out of the way. Obviously don't rush it. You want to make sure that everything's as good as can be, but if you're hesitating to submit your application when you've already done everything for it, there's no point. Even if the deadline is in 2 weeks but you've done everything correctly, just go submit it. You don't have anything to worry about. That's one thing. Make sure that your personal statement's up to scratch as early as possible. Another thing is to be on top of your A-levels from day one, okay? Because this year you're going to probably be slipping up. Even if you have a really good robust plan, you're still probably going to slip up from time to time, and that's okay. But as long as you've got a decent plan and you've got something to work off of, it will make things slightly easier. If you're going into year 13 right now and you have a few flashcards that you haven't made from year 12 or a few notes that are missing and things like that, try and get that all done. Make sure that you don't have to worry about that. So when you come into year 13, you've already got the reviews in place for year 12, so you can consistently do those whilst reviewing the stuff from year 13, whilst doing the new things from year 13, whilst going over that new content, right? It's always a juggle. It's going to be a lot. But trust me, if you are proactive, you'll be fine. Am I screwed if I didn't revise year 12 content and want to do early applications? You're not screwed at all. Those two things don't correlate. Your early application has nothing to do with revising year 12 content. The only thing your early application has in correlation with, I guess, is your predicted grades. But whether you're doing an early application or whether you're doing a late application, your predicted grades are going to be the same, unless you do some sort of appeal. But normally they will be the same and it won't matter. So if you know none of your year 12 content, but you want to do an early application, that's fine. Your early application just means that you have to do your personal statement early and you have to pick your universities early. That's it. So you can do your early application. Just make sure that you get your personal statement out of the way as quickly as possible, because you're going to have a lot of other things to worry about as well. And when you've got this deadline of early application coming up, it's very easy for you to just forget about it until it's too late. So you really want to make sure you start early. But you're not screwed by any means. This one's not a question, but I wanted to share it with you guys anyways. Not related, but good luck in uni. I'm so happy for you. That's so sweet. I really appreciate that. Next question. Will I be okay? Trust me, you're gonna be fine. You'll be okay, don't worry. No matter what happens, you're going to get through. And in a year's time, you're going to be looking back like, how did I even manage? Because that's how I feel right now. I can't imagine going back to year 13 now. I don't know how I managed through that whole thing. It's hell, but at the same time, I enjoyed every bit of it. I don't know how. It's really odd. It's a really odd feeling, you know. Next question. How do you fit entrance exam prep, studying, and personal statements all during the first month? This is something you're probably going to find out yourself how to do, and I think a lot of people go through it themselves, and it's something that you're just gonna have to figure out. As I said before, the best thing to do is to take it all one by one. Get your personal statement done early, and then once your entrance exam is coming up, revise for that and just focus on your revision for that. Try and tone down everything else. So try and not do as much A-level revision, just focus on that. It's okay if you don't do very well at the start of your year in terms of your A-level content. That's fine. Right now you've got bigger things to worry about. And then once these things are done, you can then go back to your A-levels. But please try not to do everything at once. You've only got 100% energy, and if you try and distribute that energy towards everything, you're going to have very little towards each thing. You really want to keep that 100% and fire it towards one thing at a time, because that way you're going to get the best results. Is the jump actually that big, or is it somewhat okay? Now this is a question that you're going to have to really find out for yourself. Now personally what I think about the jump from year 12 to year 13 in terms of A-level content, yes, there's a jump, but it's only for certain subjects. For something like maths, you're pretty much doing the same thing you were in year 12, but it's just some things are a bit more strange, right? It's not that bad. For biology, we've got a big jump. Biology in year 13, you go straight into your photosynthesis, your respiration, and oh my, the brain power required to understand those things initially is a lot, and your head is gonna be spinning. I remember in those first couple of lessons, the amount of information that was flying into my head, and I was just looking at the whiteboard and I was like, what is that? It is a lot, and it's going to be very painful at first, but trust me, it's going to become very manageable. Now, so I would say yes, there is a noticeable jump from year 12 to year 13. In fact, you could even say it's bigger than the jump from year 11 to year 12, because the content feels very different in year 13 than it does from year 12, and it just becomes so much harder for no reason. But it really depends on the subject. So I'm just saying good luck. Annoying thing about year 13 as well is the content is harder, but you're also doing it at a faster pace. You've got more content to cover in year 13, so you have more difficult content and you're firing through it much faster than you would have been in year 12, so it becomes very difficult to keep up. That also gives that impression that you have a much bigger jump because you're doing so much more difficult things at a faster pace, so it's harder to keep up, you know. So yeah, that's my experience. That's why I think. I would say yes, there is a big jump, but it's manageable. It's very manageable. I think the hard thing about the jump is the fact that you've now got new things to worry about. You've got applications to worry about. You've got interviews to worry about. You've got all this new stuff to worry about. Next question, advice on preparing for medical school interviews. How do you manage it alongside year 13? I'm going to make an entire video on medical school interviews, and I'm going to make an entire video on all of those application processes that I went through. I'll talk about that in more detail later on in those videos, but I'm going to say in terms of managing it with my year 13 content, it's literally a case of switching your brain on and off, right? When you've got an interview coming up, you forget about your A-levels for a bit. When your interview's done, you then catch up on everything that you've missed. That's just something you're going to have to do. I remember in lessons, so when my interview started coming up, I just literally wouldn't do the work. And your teachers should be somewhat lenient with it as well, and they should understand that you've got an interview coming up. They'll allow you to do your own interview preparation, and even if they didn't allow me, I still would do it. It doesn't, like, I could not care less if the teacher wants me to do static rigid bodies in class, right? I don't care. I have an interview coming up, and that's what I'm going to be preparing for, and after that's done, I'm going to catch up on the lesson. I'm going to then catch up on that information. But when you have an interview, please just focus on your interview. Maybe do a bit of A-level content on the side, but really focus on your interview. It's very important that you do well in this interview, because it literally is the reason you're going to either get into the place or you're not going to get the place for your medical school. So please do your revision for those interviews. It's very important. This is a really good question. If you could do year 13 again, so if you could redo year 13, what would you do differently? Now, that is actually a really interesting one to think about. If I was to do year 13 all over again, I think I would have done the exact same things I just did, because I was constantly making sure I was reviewing the content. I made sure to prioritize my interviews and my UCAT and BMAT and whatever when needed to. I think maybe the one thing I would probably change is to focus more on those entrance exams. Maybe focus less on the A-levels, especially at the start of the year, and focus more towards that like application side, because at times I was trying to do both, and I was really trying to make sure that I spent my 100% energy on both the A-levels and both the interviews at the same time, which isn't possible, right? I think everything else I did, it was essential for me to get to the place I did now. I don't think I want to change any of it. Even the fact that I didn't do much work in lessons across the 2 years, I still put the effort in, but I spent more of that effort at home and during freeze. That's just something about me. I can't really do that work in the lesson. I find that I spend the lessons more to socialize than to actually do the work, just because I can't. The content doesn't sit with me right in the lesson itself. I only really use the lessons as a form of just seeing what the content is to familiarize myself with it and to ask questions on it. But then the actual practice and the actual reviews, I try and do outside of the lesson. So maybe I could change that. Maybe I could have spent my lessons more productively, but genuinely, I think the memories I made during those lessons make me think that I don't want it any other way, and I'm happy with the way things have turned out. So I'm gonna say it was all good, just to keep things a little bit dialed down at times, because sometimes I went too hard on myself, and sometimes I really pushed myself when I had nothing left. Out of 10, how shocking is it to know that it was your final year of school? Honestly, this is something that it always was there, and I was really sad that it was my final year of school. But the thing is, you can't really have time to register that. You don't really have that time, because you've got so much going on. It just kind of like, the year just goes by, and it only really becomes a thing once you've done your A-levels and once you've realized that this is it. Then you start thinking about like the future and stuff, and you start to really realize that, oh wow, this is it. But for most of the year, you're going to be fine. You're not even going to realize that it's a big deal. It doesn't feel like a last year for most of it. For most of it, it just feels like another year. It's just at the end you start really thinking about it. So I'd say out of 10, it's not that shocking. I'd put a 4 probably. It really, like, as the year comes to an end though, it does start to hit a bit. But even now, it feels really odd. I think year 13 is really essential. I feel like year 13 is really essential because I've gotten really close with my friends, and I think that it wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for the last year of school. So I don't know, as much as I'm sad that year 13 is over, I genuinely think that it was an ending that was meant to happen, and I had to have, it was part of the character development. It was part of the arc, you know. Okay, next question. I feel like I'm cooked because I haven't read any books for my personal statement. Now, I'm going to talk about personal statement and work experience and things you have to do and things like that in a completely separate video. But I'm just going to say right now that you don't have to do anything. You don't have to do a certain X amount of work experience unless they actually stay in their requirements or something, because I know some courses do. But there's nothing you have to do. It's just a case of, if you can do it, great. If you can't do it, okay, maybe find something else. Because you're going to realize once you start writing your personal statement, you're not going to have space to write most of the stuff in. I read a lot of books because I genuinely thought that you had to read all the important medical books in order to get into medical school, right? So I read a lot of them, and to be honest, I really enjoyed reading them. Just like generally, just reading them was fun. It was nice, especially War Doctor. That is a book that changed me. That was such a beautiful book. I really recommend you guys to read it just for fun. You don't even have to read it for the case of your medical school application. Even if you're not applying for med, it's such a beautiful book. I really recommend it. I only talked about one book in my personal statement. That was only because it tied really well with a piece of research that I did, and so I talked about that book in that as well. But genuinely, you don't have to read anything specific. So if you think, oh, I'm cooked because you've not read any books, you're calm. That's fine. Don't read books for the sake of reading them though. I would say the most important thing is to make a Google document, and whenever you do read a book, whenever you do some work experience, whenever you find an article, whenever you watch a video, to make a note of it in this document. You want it to be a really long document because it's good to have a lot of different things, because then you have a lot of things to pick and choose from, and it's a case of linking things together. You don't want to just find a book that has no relevance to what you're doing and you just want to throw it into your personal statement and be like, oh yeah, I read this book by the way, anyways, moving on. That's not what you want to do. What you want to do is you want to talk about one thing and you want to make it flow nicely towards the book that you've read, and you want to show how that book that you've read has also strengthened your like passion towards the subject, or like something like that, you know. Or like, so for medicine, you really want to show you have the qualities of a doctor. So sometimes you're talking about a specific quality and you're talking about how you demonstrated that quality in a work experience, and then you tie it into a book that also has a similar quality and that also taught you lessons about that quality that you didn't previously know, right? I want to talk more about this in a separate video. Trust me, you're fine. You don't have to read any books. You don't have to read anything specific. Just do as much as you can, right? I would say it's important to read books, right? Try and find some books to read. But if you don't like the book, don't read it. Don't force yourself yourself to read a book that you don't like, because it's harder to write about it. Focus on finding a good book that you genuinely have some sort of interest in reading, and then work with that, and then make a note of it as well. And I think that should help. And yeah, there's a second question here as well. I've been to lectures and done lots of work experience, but should I still read a book? You don't have to read a book. You don't even need to mention you've read any books in your personal statement. They're not going to ask you, have you read this book? They're not going to ask you something like that. That's just silly, right? So if you've been to lectures, if you've done work experience, that's great. If you really want to read a book though, I would say by all means go pick up one, give it a read, see if you like it. If you don't like it, don't mention it anywhere. You just can drop it. That's fine. You don't have to finish the book if you're not enjoying it. Okay, we've got last 2 questions here and then we're done. So the next question is how to apply to medicine. So in terms of what to include in your personal statements and things like that. Once again, I'm going to make an entire video on that. So rest assured, you'll be fine. I'm going to really try and assist you guys with this whole application journey, because genuinely it's a hard journey, but it's very doable. So I've got a lot of advice for that, and I'm definitely going to share as much of it as I can. Last question, would you recommend learning ahead and then focus on exam practice and revision as soon as possible? So I did kind of answer this question as well near the start of the video. I would not recommend learning ahead. I would recommend sticking to what you're learning now and just focusing on reviewing. If you have extra time, rather than spending that extra time learning ahead, look back at what you've already done and make sure that it's as good as it can be, right? You really want to do exam practice as early as possible. If you can right now, you want to start doing year 12 questions. You want to really make sure that your year 12 content, your AS content is as strengthened as possible. But don't worry, I'm going to be making some more videos on that as well. So stay tuned for those as well. And that's it. That is all the questions that you guys have sent me on the Q&A. So I really appreciate every single one of you guys for replying and giving me a question. And I really hope that my responses have somewhat helped. Some of the responses here as well, I just want to share this with you guys. I don't know what's going on there. I am back now. I'm going to be uploading regular content from now on. Hopefully some UCL vlogs when I start my university as well. So stay tuned for that, and I'm really excited to be back. So I hope this video helped. If it did, share it with some people that you might think will benefit from it. And apart from that, I have nothing else to say. So subscribe if you haven't already, and good luck. If you're going to year 13, really, really good luck, because it's a lot. Trust me, it's going to be a heavy year, but you're going to get through it. And once you get through it, you're going to be so proud of yourself. So thanks for watching, and see you guys next year.